The morning was gray and thin when the Duke of Marlbridge left his own coach 3 miles from the village of Ashendale. He stepped down onto the damp road, pulled a plain wool coat over his shoulders, and told his driver to go on without him. The driver did not argue. He had been in service long enough to know when his master had made up his mind, and this was one of those mornings. The Duke's name was Dorian Vale. He was not yet 30, though his face carried something older than his years. He had a heavy way of looking at things, as if he weighed each one before he let it go. He had been lied to before. Twice, in fact. Once by a woman who wanted his name, and once by a man who wanted his money. He had promised himself he would not be lied to a third time. That was why he was standing in the mud with a worn coat and boots that had been scuffed on purpose. The betrothal had been arranged by letters. He had never met the girl. He knew only that her family was old and poor, that her father had a good name and a bad estate, and that everyone he trusted had told him she was suitable. Suitable was not enough. He wanted to see her before she knew he was watching. He walked. The road smelled of wet leaves and horse. Somewhere far off, a rook called and another answered. The wind pushed against his coat and he pulled it tighter, and he thought about how strange it was that a duke could walk 3 miles and no one would know him if he did not want them to. The village came into view slowly. First a stone wall, then a low roof, then the crooked steeple of a small church. Ashendale was not a rich place. The cottages leaned toward one another as if they were tired. Smoke rose from 3 of the chimneys, gray and thin, and the air carried the sharp scent of burning peat. At the edge of the village, the road split. One arm went east toward the manor of the Holloway family, where he was expected in 2 days' time. The other arm went south toward the sea. The Duke stood at the crossroads for a moment and listened. He heard hooves. Fast ones, too fast. He turned his head, and around the bend of the road came a coach, a proper traveling coach, 4 horses in front, and something was wrong. The led horse's eyes were white and wide. The driver was not on the box. The reins were dragging. The coach rocked and jumped as the wheels struck stones, and the horses were running as horses run when they are terrified. The Duke's heart did a strange thing. It did not race. It slowed. He had felt this before in battle, that odd quiet that came when danger arrived. He stepped back toward the hedge, meaning to let the coach pass and then run after it, though he knew he would never catch it on foot. He did not see the woman at first. She came from the other side of the road, from the path that led down to the mill. She was carrying a basket over one arm, and she was not tall, and her cloak was the same brown color as the hedge behind her. And that was why he did not see her until she was already in the road. She set the basket down. She did it carefully, as if she had all the time in the world. She stepped into the middle of the crossroads. She raised both her hands. "Stop," she said, not loud, not shouting. Just a firm, clear word. The Duke opened his mouth to shout at her to move. Nothing came out. There was no time. The led horse saw her. Its ears went back. It tried to swerve, and the horse beside it swerved the other way, and the whole coach began to slew sideways. She did not move. She kept her hands up, and she kept talking, though he could not hear the words from where he stood, only the low, steady tone of them, the way a person speaks to a frightened child. The led horse came to a shuddering, sliding stop 3 feet from her. Its sides were heaving. Foam dripped from its mouth onto the road. The other horses stumbled and pulled and finally stood, blowing hard through their nostrils, their hooves stamping on the wet stones. She lowered her hands. She stepped forward, still calm, and put her palm against the led horse's neck. She said something to it. The horse dropped its head. The Duke found that he could move again. He walked toward her without hurrying, because hurrying would only frighten the horses. His boots were loud on the road. She looked up when he was close, and he saw her face for the first time. She was not beautiful in the way the daughters of earls were beautiful. Her hair was the color of wet oak, pinned back but coming loose at the sides. Her eyes were gray, the gray of the sky that morning. She had a smudge of flour on her cheek, and she did not know it, and it made her look like someone who had been useful that day already. "Are you hurt?" he asked. No, she was still looking at the horse, running her hand down its damp neck. But something is wrong inside. Someone is in the coach. He had not thought of that. He had been looking at her. He turned to the coach and pulled the door open. There was a man slumped on the seat, older, gray at the temples, dressed too fine for this road. His head was against the window frame, and there was blood in his hair. He was breathing. But only just. "He fell," she said behind him. "The driver. I saw the driver on the road half a mile back. He must have gone over when the horses bolted." The Duke turned. "You saw this, and you came ahead of the coach?" "I ran," she said, as if it were obvious. "The road narrows at the crossroads. If they went past here at that speed, they would have hit the wall at the bend and killed him." He looked at her. He looked at the man in the coach. He looked at the horses. He said, "You could have been killed." She did not answer that. She was already climbing up into the coach beside the injured man, lifting his head gently, feeling along his skull with her fingers. Her hands were quick and sure. She had done this before. "He needs a bed and a warm room," she said, "and someone who knows more than I do. Is there a doctor near?" "In the next town, 6 miles. Too far." She pressed her handkerchief against the cut on the man's head. "There is a room at the inn. If you help me, we can move him there." Carefully, he was not used to being told what to do. He noticed this about himself with a small, cold surprise. He was not angry. He simply noticed. And then he did what she said. Between them, they lifted the man out of the coach. The Duke took his shoulders. She took his feet. She was stronger than she looked. She did not complain when the man's weight pulled at her arms. She only kept her eyes on his face, watching for any sign that he was waking, or worse, slipping further away. The inn was 100 yards down the road, past the crossroads, and around a low bend. It was called the Blue Hare, and it had a painted sign that swung in the wind and made a soft creaking sound. The innkeeper, a broad woman with red cheeks, came out at the sound of hooves and stopped when she saw what they were carrying. "Merciful heaven," she said. "What have you got there?" "An injured gentleman," the woman with the gray eyes said. "The upper room, if you please. And hot water, and clean cloth." The innkeeper looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded and turned back into the inn, calling for her daughter. There was no argument. The Duke noticed that too. They carried the man up the narrow stairs. The upper room was small and clean, with a bed against one wall and a window that looked out onto the yard. The Duke set the man down as gently as he could. The woman with the gray eyes moved at once to the basin, poured water, wet a cloth, and began to clean the wound on his head. The Duke stood back and watched her. He did not know what else to do. She had taken over the room the way a captain takes over a ship, without making a show of it. "Who is he?" she asked without looking up. "I do not know." That was true. The Duke had not looked at the man's coat closely, or at the crest on the coach door. He had been looking at her. "His coat is fine," she said. "The buttons are silver. His boots are London-made." She paused, cloth in hand. "He is somebody. Someone will come looking for him." "Yes, then we had best have him alive when they arrive." She worked for a long time. The Duke was sent to fetch things, more water, a strip of linen, a small bottle of vinegar the innkeeper produced from a cupboard. He fetched. He was, for the first time in many years, useful in a small and ordinary way, and he found that it did not bother him. At last the injured man was cleaned and bound and settled under a wool blanket. His breathing was steadier. Some color had come back into his lips. The woman with the gray eyes sat down on the wooden stool by the bed and let her shoulders drop for the first time. "He will live, I think," she said. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because he is stubborn." "I only stopped the coach." You stopped 4 horses at full run with your hands and your voice. He said it flatly, without flourish. It was a fact. He was a man who dealt in facts. She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw her take him in, the plain coat, the scuffed boots, the mud on his sleeves, the way his hair was too well cut for the rest of him. She was thinking. He watched her think. "You are not from the village," she said. "No, where are you bound?" "East," he kept his voice easy. "I have work at a house up the road." "Holloway Manor? You know it? Everyone in Ashendale knows it." She wiped her hands on her apron. What sort of work? He had prepared for this question. He had prepared several answers. But none of them wanted to come out of his mouth now. He looked at her calm gray eyes and at the smudge of flour on her cheek that she still did not know was there, and he said, "I am to look over the stables, for the master who is coming." It was not quite a lie. He did intend to look over the stables. He intended to look over everything. She nodded. If she was disappointed to hear he was a servant, she did not show it. She stood up and went to the window and looked out at the sky. "The rain will come again in an hour," she said. "You should eat something before you go on." "Mrs. Pole has good bread, and you?" She turned back. "I must go home. My father will worry. I only came out to bring flour to the mill." She looked at the man on the bed. "But I will come back this evening. Someone should sit with him. I will sit with him until you come back." She studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, and she said, "Thank you." She said it plainly, without weight, as if it were a thing that ought to be said, and so she was saying it. And then she picked up her cloak from the chair, and she went. The Duke stood by the window and watched her walk back to the crossroads, pick up the basket she had left in the road, and go on down the path toward the mill. She did not look back. It struck him, watching, that he did not know her name. He asked the innkeeper about her, later, when he came down for a bowl of broth. The innkeeper was polishing a mug behind the bar. She did not look up. "That would be Miss Vivienne Ishcombe," she said. "The vicar's daughter. She lost her mother 2 winters back. She keeps the house for her father now, and she brings us the flour from the mill on Wednesdays because the miller's boy has a bad leg and cannot manage the walk. She is not afraid of horses. She grew up with them. Her uncle was a coachman before the drink took him. He taught her to speak to a bolting team when she was 10 years old. She has stopped a runaway before this, twice, that I know of. Once was a farm cart, once was a gig with a child in it." The innkeeper set the mug down. "You will not find another like her in this county, sir." "No," the Duke said. "I do not think I will." He went back upstairs. The man on the bed was still asleep. The Duke sat by the window and watched the road. He did not think about the man on the bed. He thought about the woman who had stopped a coach with her hands. She came back in the evening, as she had said she would. She brought a small pot of broth and a candle and a folded cloth. She sat by the injured man and spooned broth between his lips when he began to stir. She spoke to him in the same low, steady voice she had used with the horse. The man drank a little and slept again. The Duke sat across the room, and he watched her, and he wondered how long it would take her to find out who he was and what she would say when she did. He learned 2 things that night, sitting in that inn room with a candle between them and a stranger sleeping in the bed. The first thing he learned was that she read. She had a small book in the pocket of her apron. When the man on the bed was quiet, she took it out and read a page by the candle. He asked her once what it was. She said it was a book of maps. He asked why she carried a book of maps. She said, "Because I have never been out of this county, and someday I mean to be." The second thing he learned was that she did not lie. He watched her carefully all evening, looking for the small shifts and softenings that people use when they know they are being watched by a man who might matter to them. She did not soften. She did not perform. She was tired, and she showed it. She was worried about the man on the bed, and she showed it. When Mrs. Pole came up to ask if she wanted supper, she said yes, she was hungry, and she ate the bread and cheese with both hands, and she did not apologize for eating. The Duke thought about the daughters of earls in London who ate 3 grapes at a dinner and pretended not to have appetites, and he thought about this woman with flour still on her cheek, and he made a note of it in the part of his mind where he kept the things he did not intend to forget. The next morning, the injured man woke. He blinked at the ceiling for a while, and then he blinked at Vivienne, who was sitting beside him with her book of maps, and then he blinked at the Duke, who was leaning against the doorframe. He tried to sit up. He winced. He fell back on the pillow. "Where?" the man said. "Where am I?" "The blue hair," Vivienne said. "In Ashendale." "Your coach ran away. Your driver fell from the box half a mile back. He is at his cousin's cottage. He has a broken arm, but he will live. You struck your head. You have been asleep for a night and half a day." The man took this in slowly. Then he looked at the Duke. His eyes sharpened. Even wounded, even weak, they sharpened. "Your Grace," he said. The room went very still. Vivienne did not move. She was holding the book of maps in her lap, and her hands did not move, and her face did not move. But the Duke saw the small change in her eyes. He saw the moment she understood. The man on the bed struggled up on his elbow. "Forgive me. I did not know you would be. That is, we did not expect." "Your letter said the 14th. It is the 12th," the Duke said quietly. "Yes, yes, of course." The man's eyes moved to Vivienne, and back to the Duke, and back to Vivienne. He looked confused. "Miss, forgive me. I do not, Miss Ashcombe," Vivienne said. Her voice was perfectly level. "I am the vicar's daughter. I helped bring you here. Miss Ashcombe." The man made a small bow from the pillow. "I am in your debt. Wilcox is my name. I am the Duke of Marlbridge's steward." "I was sent ahead to prepare." He stopped. He looked at the Duke again, who had said nothing. "That is, His Grace, of course, is standing in the doorway," Vivienne said. She stood up. She set the book of maps down on the chair, very carefully, as if it might break. She smoothed her apron with both hands, and the smudge of flour was gone from her cheek now. She had washed it off that morning, and the Duke had noticed, and it had made him sorry. She looked at him. She did not look away. She said, "The stables, then. That was your work." "Yes, for a master who is coming." "Yes, you are the master." "Yes." She was quiet for a long moment. The Duke watched her face and saw nothing move, and he understood that she was doing the same thing she had done with the runaway horses. She was holding herself perfectly still, while something dangerous decided whether to stop or to run. "I see," she said at last. She picked up her book of maps. She put it in the pocket of her apron. She turned to the man on the bed, and her voice was kind when she spoke to him. "Mr. Wilcox, I will send Mrs. Pole up with some broth. You must eat a little and rest. If your head still aches this evening, tell her and she will fetch me." "Miss Ashcombe, rest," she said, gently, and she went. She passed the Duke in the doorway. She did not stop. She did not curtsy. She did not look at him. The scent of her, soap and something warmer, wool and bread, and the faint clean bite of vinegar from the cloth she had used the night before, passed close and was gone. He heard her feet on the stairs. He heard the door of the inn open and close. He stood in the doorway with his hand still on the frame, and he did not move for a long time. "Your Grace," Wilcox said from the bed. "I have. I am afraid I have. You have done nothing." "Rest." But she did not know? "No." Wilcox was silent. Then, carefully, he said, "She stopped my coach, Your Grace?" "On foot?" "She stopped 4 horses at the run. With her hands." The steward was quiet for a while. Then he said that was well done of her. Yes, the Duke went down the stairs and out into the road. The rain had stopped in the night, and the morning was pale and clean, and the crossroads were empty. He stood at the place where she had stood the day before. He looked at the mud, and there were still the marks of her small boots pressed into it, half washed by the rain, but visible if a man knew where to look. He walked to the vicarage. It was a low stone house with a garden gone slightly wild, and there was smoke coming from the chimney. He knocked on the door. A thin old man in a black coat opened it, the vicar himself, unshaven, his collar loose. He looked surprised to see a stranger. "May I speak with your daughter, sir? She is not at home." "May I ask when she will return?" The vicar looked at him more carefully. He took in the clothes, still plain, still muddy at the hem. He took in the way the Duke stood, the way a man stands when he has never once had to explain himself. The vicar's eyes narrowed. "You are the gentleman from the inn." "I am." "She came home this morning very quiet." "She does not go quiet, my daughter. She only goes quiet when she has been made a fool of." "Sir, I do not know who you are, but I know what she looked like when she came through that door, and I will thank you not to trouble her further." The vicar closed the door. Not slammed, closed. Quietly, firmly, finally. The Duke stood on the step for a moment and listened to the small sound of the latch. Then he turned and walked back to the inn. That afternoon he sent his own coach for. It arrived by evening, black and lacquered and drawn by 4 matched grays, and the crest on the door was painted so clearly that a child could have read it. He had it stand in the yard of the Blue Hare for an hour, in full view of anyone who passed, so that there could be no more secrets between him and the village. He did not go back to the vicarage that night. He was learning, slowly, that with this woman he could not do the thing he was used to doing. He could not simply arrive and expect the world to arrange itself around him. She was not the world. She was a woman who had stopped a coach with her voice. He sat in the inn parlor and wrote a letter. He wrote it 3 times. The first 2 were too long. The third was very short. "Miss Ashcombe, I gave you a false name and a false trade because I have been lied to twice, and I did not wish to be lied to a 3rd time. That is a reason. It is not an excuse. If you will allow me 1 hour of your time, I will call at the vicarage tomorrow at 3. If you will not, send word, and I will not come." Vale, he signed it only with his name, not his title, just his name, Dorian Vale. He sent it with the innkeeper's boy. The boy came back an hour later with no answer. He almost took that as a no. Then Mrs. Pole came into the parlor with a mug of ale and set it down and said without looking at him, she read it. She put it in her apron pocket. "That is not a no, your grace. That is a not yet." "How do you know?" "Because I have known her since she was a child in short skirts." The innkeeper wiped her hands on her cloth. If it were a no, she would have burned it in front of the boy. She is not one for polite refusals. He slept badly that night. He did not remember, afterward, what he thought about. Only that when he woke, the sky outside his window was the same gray as her eyes. He went to the vicarage at 3, as he had said he would. The vicar opened the door again. He looked at the Duke's coat. The good coat now, the London coat, the one that fit, and his face did not soften. But he stepped back. "She is in the garden," he said. The garden was behind the house, a small square of hedged grass with a bench under a crabapple tree. She was on the bench. She was not reading. She was only sitting, her hands in her lap, and she looked up when he came around the corner of the house, and she did not stand. "Sit, if you like," she said. He sat. Not on the bench beside her, on the low stone wall opposite, an arm's length away. It felt right to keep the distance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Somewhere in the hedge, a small bird was making a small sound. The air smelled of turned earth and rosemary from a pot by the door. A single wet leaf fell from the crabapple and landed on the grass between them. "I have read your letter," she said at last. "Yes." 3 times. "Yes." She looked at him. Her gray eyes were steady, but he could see now, close and in daylight, that there was tiredness under them. She had not slept well either. "You lied to me about your name." Yes, and your trade. Yes, and why you were on my road at that hour. Yes, she let each yes fall between them. She was not angry. That was worse. He would have known what to do with anger. She was measuring him. You could have told me last night, in the inn. When we sat with Mr. Wilcox, you had hours. I know. Why did you not? He thought about the answer for a long time before he gave it. He had promised himself he would tell her the truth, whatever it was. He owed her that, at least. Because I liked being someone you spoke to as an equal, he said. I have not been that in a long time. She did not move. Then, slowly, she looked down at her hands. That is a poor reason. Yes, it is also, she said, an honest one. She was quiet again. He waited. You came here in disguise, she said. You came to look at me before we were introduced, to see whether the letters my father sent your steward were true, whether I was suitable. Yes, you expected to find me at Holloway Manor, because the arrangement was through my mother's cousin who married a Holloway. That is how these things travel. Yes, and instead you found me in a road, stopping a coach. Yes, for the first time something moved at the corner of her mouth, not a smile, something smaller. That must have been inconvenient. It was not what I planned. No, I imagine not. She looked up at him. Your Grace, Dorian, please, if you can bear it. She hesitated. Then she said, Mr. Vale, then. I cannot use the other yet. That is fair. Mr. Vale, I am angry with you. I know. I am angry not because you are a duke, or because you were in disguise. I have read enough books to know that great men sometimes do foolish things when they are afraid. I am angry because you sat with me for an evening in a small room by a candle, and you let me be tired in front of you, and you let me eat with both hands, and you let me tell you about my book of maps. And in all of that time, you knew who you were, and you knew who I was, and you did not tell me. That is what I am angry about. He absorbed it. He did not defend himself. He had learned that much at least in the past 2 days. Yes, he said, that is the thing I did wrong. She let out a small breath. It was not forgiveness. It was only the sound of someone setting down something heavy for a moment. What do you want, then? She said. You have come here. You have said your piece. What is it you want? He looked at her. He thought about all the answers he had rehearsed in the night. None of them was good enough. I want to be introduced to you, he said. Properly, as I should have been in the first place. And I want to know whether, having been introduced, you would allow me to call on you the way any other man would, without disguise, without arrangement. Because I have come to think, in the last 2 days, that the letters between our families were not the reason a man should marry you. And I would like the chance to find the reason for myself. He heard himself say it. He heard how it sounded. He did not take it back. She was very still on the bench. The wind moved a strand of hair against her cheek, and she did not push it away. Mr. Vale, she said, that is a great deal to ask. I know. You are a duke. If you call on me, the village will talk. My father will hope. And if you decide, after all, that I am not suitable, I will be a woman a duke came to look at and set down again. There is no small version of that. There is not. Then you must be sure. I am not sure of you yet. I would be lying if I said I was. But I am sure of one thing. He paused. He wanted to say it right. I am sure that in the road, when the coach was coming, you did not think about your own life. You thought about the man in the coach. And I have not, in my whole life, met more than 2 people of whom that was true. I would like to know the third one. She looked away. She looked at the crabapple tree and at the sky beyond it, and she was quiet for a long time. I will think about it, she said. Thank you. That is not a yes. I know. You must not come back for 3 days. If, after 3 days, you are still willing, you may call. My father will be at home. He will be difficult. He is a good man, but he is difficult, and he does not forgive easily. That is not my problem to fix for you. No, I understand. And you must not send gifts, or letters, or make any grand gesture. If you do, my answer will be no, and I will not change it. I understand. 3 days, she said. He stood up. He made a small bow, not the deep formal bow he had been taught as a boy, but something plainer, something he meant. She did not stand. She only nodded. He walked out of the garden. At the door of the house, he passed the vicar, who watched him go without a word. The Duke did not look back at the bench under the crabapple tree. He had a strong feeling that if he looked back, she would already have gone inside, and he did not want to see her leaving. The 3 days passed slowly. He stayed at the inn. He wrote no letters. He sent no gifts. He went once to look in on Mr. Wilcox, who was sitting up in bed and eating soup and complaining about the road. He walked, twice, along the path by the mill. He did not go into the village more than he had to. He told himself he was being patient. On the second day, he did the small thing. He had not planned to. He had gone out early, before the village was awake, to walk off a sleepless night. His steps had taken him past the mill, past the small stone bridge over the stream, and up the low hill to the churchyard. The vicar's church was there, gray and squat, with lichen on its walls. He almost turned back. Then he saw an old man on the path with a stone in his hands. The old man was the sexton. He was trying to lift a stone that had fallen from the churchyard wall. It was too heavy for him. He was not asking anyone for help. There was no one to ask. It was 6 a.m, and the village was still asleep. The Duke stopped. He looked at the stone. He looked at the old man. "Let me," he said. The sexton looked up in surprise. He began to say something about a gentleman not troubling himself. The Duke did not answer. He took off his coat. He folded it and set it on the grass. He lifted the stone. It was heavier than he expected. His back complained. He bent his knees and lifted again, and this time he got it up, and the sexton guided it back into its place in the wall. The old man wiped his hands on his coat. "You did not have to, sir. No, bless you, sir, do not tell anyone. It is not a thing I did for anyone to know about." The sexton looked at him a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "As you wish, sir." The Duke put his coat back on. He walked down the hill. He did not think about it again. It had not been a plan. It had only been a thing that needed doing, and he had been there, and so he had done it. On the 3rd day, at 3 p.m, he went to the vicarage. The vicar opened the door. He did not smile. But he stepped back and said, "She is in the parlor." The parlor was small and warm and smelled of lavender and old books. She was standing by the window when he came in. She turned. She was wearing a plain gray dress, and her hair was pinned more carefully than it had been in the road. She looked, he thought, like a woman who had decided something. "Mr. Vale," she said. "Miss Ashcombe, sit down." He sat. She sat across from him. The vicar remained in the doorway, arms folded, watching. She glanced at her father. "Papa, please." The vicar hesitated. Then he stepped back into the hall and half closed the door. He did not go far. The Duke heard him settle into a chair just outside. Vivienne folded her hands in her lap. "I have thought. Yes, I asked in the village. About you. Yes, I did not ask people who would have things to gain by praising you. I asked Mrs. Pole. I asked the old blacksmith. I asked the boy who runs errands for the inn. And? They said very little. That is what interested me. When people are told a duke has come to the village, they usually have a great deal to say. These people had almost nothing." She met his eyes. "The blacksmith said you paid for your horse's shoeing without asking the price. The boy said you did not shout at him when he brought your boots back muddy. Mrs. Pole said you sat with Mr. Wilcox for 8 hours the first night and did not sleep." That is all they said. That is not very much to judge a man on. No, but it is more than nothing. She paused. There is also the matter of old Bram. He did not know the name. He waited. Old Bram is the sexton. He is my father's oldest friend. He came to us yesterday evening at supper, and he told my father that a gentleman in a plain coat had lifted the fallen stone at the churchyard wall at dawn the day before. He said the gentleman had asked him not to tell anyone. He said he had thought about it all day, and he had decided that the request had been for one kind of person and not the other, and so he would keep his promise to that one gentleman and would tell my father, because he thought my father should know. The Duke felt heat rise in his face. It had been a long time since anything had made him feel that heat. "Mr. Vale," Vivienne said, "you did not tell me you had done that. No, you did not tell anyone. No, then why did you do it?" "Because the stone was on the ground, and the man could not lift it." She was quiet. She looked at him for what felt like a very long time. "That," she said, "is the answer I was hoping for." She stood up. She went to the window. She looked out at the garden, at the bench under the crabapple tree. She did not turn around when she spoke. "I will let you call on me, Mr. Vale, if you wish. On the terms I set on the third day, which I will not repeat now, but which stand. Thank you. I have not said yes to anything else. I have not agreed to marry you. I have not agreed to feel anything about you. I have only agreed that you may come here, in daylight, with my father present, and speak to me as a man speaks to a woman he is trying to know. That is what I asked for." "Yes," she turned around. Her gray eyes were steady. "It is what I am giving." He stood. He crossed to her, not too close, only close enough that he could see the small pulse at the base of her throat. It was steady. She was not afraid of him. She had not been afraid of the runaway horses either. "May I ask one thing?" he said. "You may ask. That first day, in the road, when you stepped in front of the horses, did you know, at that moment, that you might die?" She looked at him a long moment. Then she said, "Yes, and you did it anyway. There was a man in the coach. You did not know that when you stepped into the road. I did not know he was there. I knew someone was there. There is always someone in a coach. That is the point of a coach." He almost laughed. "He did not," he said. "Quietly, Miss Ashcombe. You are—" He stopped. He did not have the word. "Yes," she said. "You are not what I expected." "No, I gathered that." There was a small silence. Something in it was almost warm. She looked down at her hands and then up again, and something in her face, not softness, exactly, but the beginning of it, moved, Mr. Vale, she said. "I have one more question for you. Ask it. When you walked from your coach that first morning, and you stood at my Crossroads in your plain coat, what did you expect to find at Holloway Manor?" He thought about it honestly. A young woman who had been told for months I was coming, who had been coached by her mother in what to say, who had practiced her curtsy in front of a mirror. Who would tell me she loved horses because she had been told I love horses? Who would agree with everything I said? And instead? Instead, he said, I did not reach Holloway Manor. I stopped at a crossroads because a coach was running away. And a woman I had never seen before stepped into the road and stopped it with her hands. And when I asked her afterward if she was hurt, she did not answer me. She was already climbing into the coach to save the man inside, and she did not know I was anyone at all. She was very still. And that, she said, is why you did not tell me who you were. That is why. I wanted to keep, for one more evening, being the man you did not have to perform for. It was a selfish thing. I do not defend it, but it is why. She let out a small breath. It was almost a laugh, but not quite. You are a very strange duke, she said. I have been told so. By whom? By my mother mostly, before she died. The room went quiet again. Outside, in the garden, a wren was singing. The vicar in the hall had stopped rustling in his chair. He had, in fact, given up any pretense of not listening. "Papa," Vivienne said, without turning her head, "you may come in." The vicar came in. He was trying not to look pleased. He was failing, a little. "You will stay for tea, Mr. Vale," Vivienne said. "I would like that very much. There is no cake. Only bread and honey." "I like bread and honey. Of course you do." She said it dryly, almost to herself, and she went to fetch the tray. And for the first time in 3 days, the Duke of Marlbridge, who was known in London as a cold man, a hard man, a man who did not smile in his portraits, smiled. He called on her every day for a fortnight after that. They did not speak of marriage. She had forbidden it. They spoke of other things, of the village, of the injured Mr. Wilcox, who was well enough now to travel, and had returned to Marlbridge with strict instructions from Vivienne to keep his head out of coach windows, of the book of maps and where in it she would go first if she could go anywhere, of horses and how to speak to them when they were frightened, of the vicar's small library, where the Duke was surprised to find a copy of a Latin book he had loved as a boy. They were not always easy. On the 4th day, she asked him about the 2 women who had lied to him, and he answered her, and she was quiet for a long time afterward, and he thought he had lost her again. On the 7th day, he made a small joke about the vicar, who was elsewhere at the time, and she did not laugh, and he understood that she would not be laughed at even at 1 step's remove, that her father was her father, and she would not have him teased by a duke or by any other man. He apologized. He meant it. She accepted it. On the 10th day, she came into the parlor with red eyes. Her father had been coughing badly in the night. She was worried. She said so plainly, without dressing it up. The Duke, without saying anything about it, sent that afternoon for the best physician in the county, at his own cost, and had the man come to the vicarage the next morning to look at the vicar. When the vicar recovered, it was not a serious matter, only a chill and a stubborn old chest. Vivienne did not thank him. She only looked at him for a long moment across the tea table, and she said, "You did not have to." "I know. You do not do things because you have to." "No, that is the thing about you, Mr. Vale," she said, "that I am beginning to understand." She had stopped calling him Your Grace some days before. She had not yet called him Dorian. He was learning to be patient with the shape of what she gave. On the 15th day he asked her. They were walking, the 2 of them, along the path by the mill. It was late afternoon. The light was low and gold, and the stream made a soft, cold sound over the stones, and there was the smell of wet grass and, somewhere far off, of a wood fire. She was walking with her hands clasped behind her back. She was in her cloak. Her cheeks were pink from the air. He stopped walking. She stopped too. "Miss Ashcombe, yes, I have kept the terms you set. You have. I have not sent gifts. No, I have not made grand gestures. No, I have come here every day for a fortnight, and I have not asked for anything I was not given." "That is true. I would like to ask you something now." She looked at him. Her gray eyes were serious. She did not pretend she did not know what was coming. "Ask," she said. He did not go down on one knee. It felt wrong here, on this path, in this light, with this woman. He said it standing. "Will you marry me?" "Not because our families arranged it, not because I am a duke. Because in a fortnight of talking with you, I have come to understand what my mother meant when she once told me that a good marriage is not 2 people looking at each other. It is 2 people looking, together, at the same thing. I would like to spend my life looking at things with you. That is what I am asking." She did not answer at once. She turned. She looked down at the stream. She watched the water move over the stones for a long moment. Then she looked at the sky, which was going pink at the edges. Then she looked at him. "Mr. Vale," she said. "Yes, you lied to me on the day we met. Yes, you have not lied to me since. No, you lifted a stone for an old man at dawn and asked him not to tell anyone. Yes, you sent for a doctor for my father without telling me. Yes, you have not once, in a fortnight, treated me as if I ought to be grateful to you. No, she drew a breath. She let it out slowly. He could see the small cloud of it in the cool air between them. Yes, she said. The word was small. It landed between them like a stone dropped in still water. He watched the ripples go out. Yes, yes, I will marry you. She said it steadily. Then, more quietly, Dorian, that was the moment. Not the proposal, the moment after. He heard her say his name for the first time, without a title in front of it, without a coldness around it, and something in his chest that had been shut for years, opened by a small, careful amount. He did not know what to do with it. He reached out, he took her hand, he did not kiss it, he only held it, in his own. And he felt how cold the tips of her fingers were, and how warm her palm was, and how when he squeezed, she squeezed back. They stood like that for a long moment by the stream. Neither of them spoke. The water ran over the stones. Somewhere far off, in the village, a bell rang for evening prayers. The scent of wood smoke drifted down from the cottages. She looked up at him, and her eyes were not the same gray as the sky anymore. They were the gray of something warmer, of a hearthstone that had held a fire all evening. I am angry with you still, she said quietly. A little, about that first day. I know, you will have to earn that back over years, not weeks. I understand. But, she said, I would rather earn it back with you than not earn it back with anyone else. He almost said something. He did not. He only tightened his hand around hers. They walked back along the path together. They did not hurry. The light was going, and the air was getting cold, and neither of them minded. When they reached the vicarage, the vicar was in the doorway with a lantern. He looked at their joined hands. He did not say anything. He stepped back and let them in. They were married in the small stone church at the top of the hill on a morning 6 weeks later. It was not a grand wedding. Vivienne had refused a grand wedding. She wore a pale gray dress because gray was the color she looked best in, and because she said she would not pretend to be any other kind of woman than she was. The vicar performed the ceremony himself. His hands shook a little as he read. Old Bram the sexton stood in the back row and cried without shame. Mrs. Pole from the Blue Hair stood next to him and did not cry, but she smiled all the way through, and afterwards she gave the bride a jar of honey and said, "Because you like bread and honey, my girl. And so does he. And so it is settled." Mr. Wilcox, fully recovered, wept during the vows. He had told everyone at Marlbridge at length about the woman who had stopped his coach, and by the time the news reached London, it had grown to the point that some ladies believed she had wrestled the lead horse to the ground with her bare hands. Vivienne, when she heard this, laughed for the first time in the Duke's hearing, and he decided at once that he would do anything in his power to make her laugh again. They did not go on a long wedding trip. She wanted to see Marlbridge. He wanted to show it to her. They went there, and she walked through the great rooms without saying much for a long time, and when they came out into the garden, she said, "It is beautiful. And it is too big. We will fix that later." He did not ask her what she meant. He knew by then that she did not say things she did not mean, and that whatever she meant to fix, she would fix. The next spring, she went with him to London, to the season. She had never been out of her own county before. She wore the gray dress. She carried the book of maps in her reticule. When they entered a ballroom for the first time and every head in the room turned, she did not shrink. She did not perform. She looked around the room the way she had looked at the runaway horses, carefully, without hurry, taking in what she needed to know. And then she looked up at him, and she said quietly, "It is only a room, Dorian. There are people in it. That is all." And he thought, in that moment, that whatever else his life had given him, it had given him this woman. and that was more than he had thought his life would ever have. She did not become a duchess who was afraid of London. She became a duchess London was, in a small and quiet way, afraid of. Not because she was cruel. She was never cruel, but because she had stopped a coach with her hands, and she had married a duke on her own terms, and she carried a book of maps in her pocket, even in a ballroom. And every woman who met her understood, sooner or later, that she was not going to be moved by things that had moved everyone else. A year after the wedding, when the crabapple tree in the vicarage garden was in bloom again, the Duke and Duchess of Marlbridge sat on the stone wall in that garden with the vicar drinking tea. The vicar was healthier that spring than he had been in years. He was not shy about telling his daughter that this was because she had married a man who sent for physicians without being asked. Vivienne told her father he was becoming sentimental in his old age. The vicar laughed. The Duke laughed. Vivienne smiled and did not laugh, because she still did not laugh often, and her husband had learned to treasure each time she did. Old Bram came up the path to bring the vicar a book that had been left behind at the church. He tipped his cap to the Duchess. He tipped it, separately, to the Duke. He said, "Your Grace," and the Duke said, "Good afternoon." Bram and old Bram went away up the hill, and Vivienne watched him go and did not say anything. When old Bram was out of earshot, she said quietly, "You know he never did tell anyone about the stone." "I know. He only told my father because he thought my father should know." "Yes, and my father only told me because he thought I should know." "Yes, that is a lot of people keeping a secret about one small kindness." The Duke looked out across the garden. The crabapple was full of pink. A bee moved slowly through the flowers, drunk with them. The air smelled of blossom and of turned earth. It was not a small kindness, he said. It was a stone that needed lifting. "That is all." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached over, and she took his hand, the way she had taken it that evening by the stream. She did not squeeze it. She only held it. "Dorian, yes, I forgave you a long time ago. I do not think I told you." He was quiet. Then he said, "You did not need to tell me. I have felt it." "Good." She turned her face up to the sun. The wind moved a strand of her hair against her cheek, and this time she did push it away, because in a year she had learned that he liked to see her face. "That is settled then, yes," he said. "That is settled." They sat for a long time in the garden with the vicar, and the bees moved through the crabapple, and somewhere down in the village a bell rang for the middle of the afternoon, and the shadow of the tree crept slowly across the stone wall as the sun went by. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was no need. She had stopped a runaway coach at a crossroads not knowing the man inside was a duke. And he had stepped down from a duke's coach, not knowing the woman ahead of him was already the truest thing he would ever meet, and the road between those two moments had been rougher than either of them had planned. But it had brought them here, to a stone wall under a blooming tree, with a jar of Mrs. Pole's honey on the tray between them and a vicar dozing in his chair. And the Duke of Marlbridge understood at last that a life was not the grand things a man was given. A life was the small kindnesses a man was willing to do when no one was watching, and the honest woman who was willing, one day, to find out about them and stay anyway. He lifted her hand. He pressed his lips, gently, to her knuckles. She did not pull away. She only looked at him with her steady gray eyes, and she said, softly, "It is only a garden, Dorian. There are people in it. That is all." And in the small joke he heard, at last, the sound of a woman who had come the whole long distance to trust him, and he thought that in all his life he would never again mistake the ordinary for the small. Because the ordinary, a road, a stone, a hand held in a garden, was where love had come to live.